Welcome to the Heart Aligned Brand. I'm your host, Leanne, brand strategist, photographer, and mentor with over 5 years experience helping women and queer-owned businesses build brands rooted in their truth. This is a space for thoughtful conversations about building a business that actually supports your life, where strategy meets self-trust and success doesn't require self-abandonment. For anyone new to you, tell us a little bit about who you are.
I'm Taylor. I am a bookkeeper slash financial business strategist. I essentially help small business owners with the financial side of their business. I help with their bookkeeping, sales tax filings, payroll, some financial planning, and kind of budgeting depending on what industry the client's in, and really acting more as like a financial partner to my clients than a traditional bookkeeper. I like to make sure that I'm kind of ingrained in the business and really moving the clients from month to month bookkeeping to the yearly bookkeeping, and then working with their CPA to make sure things are getting done correctly and making sure that my clients are taking advantage of the benefits that help them save on taxes, even though I don't do any taxes. I had a corporate background in corporate accounting. I worked in biotech startups for many years before starting my business, which kind of has helped me really understand small business a lot better and figure out how to clean things up, because in my corporate jobs, I was usually the first person in the door. So the bookkeeping was also usually a huge disaster. So it's made me be able to figure out things, especially with small business owners, when things aren't always as they might seem in the books.
Yeah, to sum it up for people who are not all financial savvy, what it sounds like to me is that like the main crux of what you do is you're really a partner with your clients. So it's not just about the bookkeeping. It's how do we look at our numbers and assess them to make educated strategic decisions in our business. And it's all rooted in that financial component. Whereas when working with other bookkeepers, a lot of the times it's just a service that you're paying for, and I may feel there's that disconnect between I have this information, I'm working with my bookkeeper, but there's not a ton of communication back and forth. And you are not that. You are a partner.
Yes. And I'm definitely available for communication. I think that's one of the things that I like to make sure my clients understand is we're here to answer your questions. And we also want to make sure that you understand your numbers and how you should be using your numbers versus just sending you a report at the end of the month. And it's important that your financial statements are set up in a way that you can read them. So often I get
Yeah.
into people's numbers and there's an account for everything. That's not helpful. There's a good
Yeah.
balance between what you need broken out for tax purposes, what you need broken out so that you can see enough detail that like you can catch something that might be an issue or somewhere that you're overspending. And then also simplifying it so that you're able to read the reports and understand what's going on a monthly basis. And you're not overwhelmed by all of the information that you are getting.
When you first started your business, how would you say that you described yourself to how you describe yourself now? And I don't know if you mentioned how long you've been in business, but that might be a good
Oh,
piece
so
to hit
in
on.
June, I'll be in business for 4 years. And when I started my business, I feel like I was very focused on calling myself a bookkeeper and the bookkeeping side of the business, not necessarily realizing that a lot of the issues my clients were having was because it wasn't just the basic bookkeeping that they needed. They more needed that like financial support and actually understanding what is going on in those numbers. There is a difference between someone that's doing your bookkeeping and can get it done cheaply versus someone that's trying to give you data that you can use and grow and expand your business and also support you along the way. A lot of my clients have worked with bookkeepers that weren't really available to them, or here are the numbers. I put them into a report and send them to your CPA, and there's not really any communication besides that. And when I started my business, I knew I didn't really want my business to be that way. I wanted to work with my clients in more detail, but it did take me a little bit to figure out how to support my clients and what they needed and what types of clients I wanted to work with. Because I think when I started my business, I was like, I want to work with anyone. They're a small business owner. I can help them. And that also led to a lot of me underpricing my services because I was like, I want to help everyone. But then as my business has grown, I've really streamlined who I want to work with. And I know that I have a lot of knowledge in more complex businesses. So I tend to lean towards helping founders that have e-commerce stores or have are interior designers or have businesses that are kind of service based, but also have some other component to it that makes it a little bit more complex because I like analyzing the data and figuring out how I can give my clients reports that actually make sense and make sure that they're doing their books in a way that actually benefits their business. I find with e-commerce founders a lot of the times that cost of goods sold just kind of gets fluffed under the rug or it just kind of gets booked to an expense and it's not really being done properly. But as your business grows, that can really affect your bottom line and affect how you're scaling because if you're writing everything off when you buy it, then there's not any expense when you sell it in future years. So figuring out what's working for clients and what's not working for clients and really where I could kind of fit in the bookkeeping space has really helped me figure out what my services look like because I think I thought bookkeeping, but I also in my head bookkeeping was more bookkeeping and financial strategy and that's really what I do now is a mix of both the numbers but also how do you interpret the numbers and use them to grow and scale your business.
Yeah, a lot of small business owners really struggle with is being willing to get specific about the type of client that they're willing to work with or that they want to work with. And you mentioned that when you started, you were like, I want to help everyone and I'm going to do bookkeeping for everyone. And there were two problems in that. One, you were attracting people that you didn't really weren't your ideal client. And then two, you were underpricing your services. How would you say getting specific on your ideal client has helped you? And when I say that, I mean like client load, profitability, revenue generating. You decided to get specific on the client that you want to serve. Was there any fear that came with that decision? And if so, how did you work through that? And now, how do you have the proof in the pudding to say that shows you that by getting specific, it was the right decision for your
So I think
business?
with me too, as I scaled, bringing on a team, it really proved that I can't just keep taking on clients in all industries because where for me, it might be easy to hop between different softwares and pull different reports. It ended up taking a lot of extra time for my team, which then would bring down my profitability because instead of me who could get through reports in maybe an hour, it was taking them 2 hours because instead of just being able to go into Shopify and pull a report and know like this is the same process that we can knock out for 5 or 6 clients. We were going into Shopify, we were going into Honeybook, we were going into this software, that software, and every software has a different reporting structure. So every time they wouldn't be able to just go in and pull the reports, they would have to go watch the loom, remember how to pull the reports and what nuances were in each of those softwares. And at first, I wasn't tracking time, so I wasn't really paying attention to that.
Wow.
And that was one of the initiatives I started last year. And I'm still really bad at tracking my own time. I'm really working. I feel like I spend a lot of time in emails, and that's not really accounted for.
Yeah.
So I've been really trying to figure out a better way to do that. But I realized that having a bunch of different clients in a bunch of different industries was causing a lot of inefficiencies in my business because it wasn't, and even for myself, I would have to like stop and be like, wait, how do I pull this report? Like, how do I even review this to make sure they're pulling it in the right way? So it was just costing us a
Yeah.
lot of time. That's when I was like, okay, well, if I'm taking on new clients, they have to be in QuickBooks because that works better with my softwares, the things that we're working on. It's a little inefficient when it comes to Stripe, but most of my clients aren't really in Stripe. So that does like the ones that are, it's not a huge deal. And then making sure that if it was a new software, it was a software that we could easily find the reports and it wasn't going to cost us a lot of time to get that data out of the reports at the end of the month. And also kind of pushing clients into the softwares that we like to use. So, like, I like all my clients to be in Gusto for payroll just because it's simpler. I have clients in other softwares and it ends up costing a lot of time because they're not doing things correctly on their end. And I'm fighting with the payroll company every month. So finding out these little things that were costing us a lot of time was super helpful. And the only reason I found that out was because I started time tracking, which I think a lot of business owners don't like to time track and find it very annoying. But I do think it's one of those things that as you scale, you realize what's being inefficient. And then from there, I was able to back into this isn't really working from a price standpoint, or knowing that if you were someone that had all these other softwares or we had to pull things from a million places, then I was going to charge you more because I had the hours to prove how much time it was actually taking to get to that point. And then I think in terms of niching down, at first I was kind of scared because I was like, am I going to get enough clients? Like, where do these people hang out? Am I really attracting the right people? But what I've learned is that it makes it so much easier to have that niche audience because then when they're talking about things, I'm like, yes, I know this software. I know this. Like, I work with a lot of interior designers who are in the software called Studio Designer. I know the software. I know the vendors they work with. I know the things they're investing in. I'm not like, what is this? Because every client has that same thing on their reports every month. So I'm like, oh, this is the networking group they're in. This is that. And it saves a lot of time because we're not pushing out questions to clients because we already know what they are. So I think niching down is scary, but it also causes a lot of efficiencies in your business that you're not going to realize if you're kind of catering to everyone, because then you have to remember so many different things. Whereas now, we know a lot of those things because they're repetitive across clients because we have clients in similar industries.
Yeah, so not only are you efficient in the work that you're doing, but you're able to better serve your client, which then equals the value that you are providing. And I think one of the biggest parts that small business owners really struggle with is understanding how valuable that is to your client, not only in being able to actually handle specific issues and challenges to them, but also on your end, where you were talking about the profitability component of it. I think when we get specific, our processes can be better and we better serve our client, which touches into this idea between freelancer versus business. And I know there are a lot of people that call themselves freelancer, and I have a love hate relationship with that because in my mind, it sort of implies I'm just out here and I'm doing my job and I'm just, and it discredits the work that you're doing. And it's also just has, I don't know what I want to call it on the top of it, but it's just like lack of professionalism. And I think as small business owners who want to be profitable, who want to actually have a business that supports our life, there has to be a level of respect and professionalism in order to deliver quality work for our clients. So,
Yeah, I would say I agree with that. And I also think when I think freelancer, I think of like Upwork or people that are basically employed by a corporate company and have like a retainer of $1 billion a month because they're getting paid from a corporation still and they're kind of moonlighting for that company. And it's not like they're trying to grow a business.
let's talk about your branding. Branding is a whole entity, a whole being. You're in year 4 of your business,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, I'll be a year 4 and
Okay, great. Another big misconception is that you say, okay, today I'm in business and tomorrow you're going to snap your fingers and like everything is happening. Statistically, it's known that it takes like 3 years for businesses to start generating enough revenue or profit, however you want to say it, to support themselves. It's like, it's hard. The journey is hard. The journey is long and our brands evolve over time. So you and I have worked together many times. I want to talk about like the first time that we worked together to where you are now and how would you say your brand has kind of morphed over time, the evolution and the growth of your business?
when we first started working together, I was kind of like, I wanted my business to be fun and bubbly and quirky and kind of me as the brand, but also assuming a different audience. So I think when we started working together, I was like, I want to attract women business owners, which is kind of still my same audience, but in all scales of their business and be that point person that's talking about bookkeeping a little bit differently. And it's not just stark suit and tie type of
Yeah,
branding. It was very fun. I feel like we had a lot of fun things in my initial brand
you
photo
did.
shoot. Lots of piggy banks. I actually have my piggy bank over over here. But it was just bookkeeping, but make it fun, which was
Yeah.
how I had approached my business the first 2 years. And then I think that I realized bookkeeping, but make it fun was always attracting like very early stage businesses which
Mhm.
is not
Mhm.
necessarily my ideal client. I like working with early stage businesses, but it has to be the certain business because I find it very frustrating at the same time because if they don't have systems in place, it makes it really hard for me to support them. And then it doesn't seem they're getting the value out of my services. So with my like evolution of my brand, which I think we almost did 2 years ago at this point, which is kind of wild
Yeah, I think it is almost 2 years since we did the
version
next
of the
version.
brand, which even now I'm
Yeah.
like, I feel like it's changing again a little bit. But I
Yeah.
think when I did the next version, I was also kind of like, okay, I that we had the fun stuff, but that wasn't really attracting the client I'm looking for. I'm trying to attract these clients that are making a 7 figures, 8 figures a year, and they are kind of not looking at my branding and also where my marketing at because I think I spent a lot of time
Yeah.
the last few years figuring out LinkedIn and growing on there in addition to Instagram and TikTok, but as part of the brand, you have to figure out like where you're also targeting people. And this time wanted a brand that I could almost grow into. That was gonna
Yeah. Yeah.
even if I kind of changed my wording, my brand would still be I would still be able to fall back on that brand. And the
Mhm.
initial brand
Mhm.
was fun, but as I felt my business changing, it didn't really fit in with what we had initially done because it was targeting a totally different audience. Whereas my second iteration of branding, I could really grow and scale the business. And it doesn't feel like I outgrew it as quickly because I had
Yeah.
taken more time to figure it out and I had more case studies of who I wanted to work with. That's a hard part when you start a business is you're like, this is who I want to work with. And then that changes 6 times as going through it. And I
Totally.
think we were very cognizant about it as we were thinking through the brand this time is like, if my ideal client kind of shifts a little bit, does this brand still work? And it does, which is so much more helpful. But it's also because I knew more of who my ideal clients were and what type of services I wanted to offer.
Yeah. And we spent a lot of time talking about that ahead of time. Like, where are you? Who are some of your best clients, ideal clients? Who do you want to move into, grow into, like you mentioned? Who are you going to seek? And we talked about kind of like your dream clients. And we use that as the benchmark for how do we want to position you in the landscape that is so that it's resonating and it makes sense. One of the misunderstandings when it comes to branding is that it's a one and done sort of situation. And when it comes to service-based businesses specifically, I do feel like there is so much iteration because we're in communication, we're in dialogue with our clients. And I have been talking about it's the old communication model was sender, message, receiver. And then it kind of just stopped. Then the internet happened and everything is everywhere all the time. And now the new communication model is sender, message, receiver, and then the loop starts over. And this is where that evolution and iteration of our brand really comes into play. So, talking about how you did the second iteration of your branding, which you went from fun, playful, bright, colorful to minimal, editorial, soft, feminine, because we are still focusing on attracting women owned businesses. How would you say the element of you and being authentic to who you are has played into the architecture of your business and architecture of your brand because they play together? And I'd love to hear how you're kind of navigating what does it mean to be authentic to you and how does that show up in your
I
brand?
think it's still I think that's something that's ever changing with business owners too, because I think we change a
Mhm.
lot as our businesses kind of grow. And I also think that it's not like the old, like, I think both brands are iterations of me. I think it's also
Yeah.
true to where I was in that point of time. And also like not knowing what you don't know. I feel like I was like, who wouldn't want to hire a fun bookkeeper? But like, I think people do. It's just not the ideal client that I am looking for. And that's where the sophistication of the brand was really helpful because it elevates the brand and makes it more serious. And I think a lot of times too, I'm younger in my business than a lot of people that are going out and starting bookkeeping businesses. And I think having the sophistication makes people take me more seriously than when the
Mhm.
brand was just fun. Because yes, I'm early in my career, but I've almost been doing this for 10 years now, which is kind of wild.
Right.
I have a lot of experience because I'm willing to get my hands dirty and figure things out. I'm not just like, oh, this is beyond my pay grade. I'm going to find the answer. If you have a question and you come to me, I'm going to make sure that I understand what your question is and how to get it back to you. That didn't necessarily play itself out in my initial brand, but that's what my new
Mhm.
brand is showing. It's still me. It's just different elements of me and what should be public,
Yeah.
like what should be facing of the actual business and where we can kind of add in the fun elements. But the fun elements can play into the more sophisticated brand. That's not what's leading with the brand. And I think that's helpful as my business has grown because that's where I'm going with even the type of clients. And I know we've talked about this a lot and it has kept coming back up again is like my business name and how it's not
Mhm.
helping me as my business is scaling. But I love the name. But now I'm getting to the point where I'm like, I might just have to use the name in a different way because it's really focusing on just bookkeeping, where that's not really what I'm doing anymore.
Yeah. 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 You're
And we had that
expanding.
conversation when we did the rebrand. And I think I was like, maybe we can like message around it. I've tried that, but I think I might need to do that change.
Yeah, so many good nuggets to kind of tease into a little bit more with this is you hit on the piece of there are still components of me that are real and true and genuine in this brand, but I had to kind of sophisticate the brand, right? In order to attract the client that I want to work with more often. And one of the things I work with my clients on is that your brand, it's very nuanced and it has different elements. The forward facing aspect of this is the visual identity. It's the images, it's the font, it's the colors, the textures, right? But other parts of your brand are client experience, copy, how you're showing up. And so maybe this fun, bubbly, colorful person isn't showing up in the visuals, but it's showing up in the way you're communicating with your clients, right? Warm, approachable, playful. So there's that piece of it. And then the other piece of this is the name. So I think renaming is such a scary thing for us because we're like, everything's going to fall through the cracks. But the other element of this, too, which I have been kind of leaning more into, is just this idea of like not taking yourself so seriously. And one of the pieces when it comes to renaming your business, this is what I would do if I were advising someone. I would say, what are your top two sources when it comes to people finding you? And if you're not relying heavily on organic search, I would say a name change is something that you could do without really feeling a big effect or hit to your brand. And it would tighten it up and make it more reputable. For someone like myself who has like a big organic search engine as far as Google, and that's one of my main traffic sources, that would be so scary. And I would be like, really think about the name change. That's where my brain's at with that. But do you think you're going to change
I
your
don't
name?
Well, I think I'm leaning towards yes, but I haven't come up with anything that I like better. So that's where I'm kind of been stuck. And I'm also like, I don't have the brain bandwidth to like do this right now. So I think it's just one of those things
Right.
that has just kind of been like at the back of my head for a while. But I'm also like, but I like the name. And so it's been one of those things where I'm like, it's on my to-do list, but so are a lot of other things.
Completely, completely. And at this point, is it really the most important thing for you to be thinking about right now? Probably
No,
not.
right now it's
You
like
know?
getting 1099s and 2025 financial statements out the door.
Right. You're like, that's what I'm
Yeah.
focusing on. That's what I'm doing. Okay, thanks. Bye. Okay, great. So I want to move into this next question because this is a really huge component, which is honoring our humanity and making decisions as business owners. And I feel like we don't talk about it enough. So let's chat about boundaries, choices, trade offs, and how do you make those decisions as you're growing your business? What has been the hardest part about navigating those different aspects? And you can kind of tap into whichever one. So, boundaries, choices,
So
trade
I think
offs.
boundaries is still one of the hardest things. I feel like I am navigating, and I was actually just listening to a podcast about this the other day, talking about how bookkeeping firms should be charging for access to them. So basically, your services should kind of be the same, and the different price points is because people get more access to you. And right
Yeah.
now, the way I added boundaries, but it's like everyone has the same boundaries. And then there's a select group of clients that have more access to me. But what
Yeah.
I'm realizing as I grow and I take on more clients is I can't give a huge chunk of people the same access to me because then I'm just in emails all day long. So I think as
Mhm.
your business grows, you're constantly redefining boundaries because when I reset my boundaries early last year, I had enough clients that it was okay. But now I'm realizing that if I answer everyone within 24 hours, then I'm always just in my inbox. So there are going to have to be people that don't get answers for 72 hours. And that is based on the tier that they're paying for. And also, I'm really
Yeah.
in the process of figuring out how to get communication so that some of my clients are communicating with my team directly versus me. And I'm kind of
Yeah.
CC'd on it, but not necessarily the one answering those things. And that's a scary boundary, I think, to set for small business owners because a lot of people started working with your business because of you and trying to make it
Yeah.
seem to other people that it is okay that my operation manager is answering email or my bookkeeper is answering email because they're more close to the reports than I am at this point. Or if they have questions on something, like it's totally fine that they're asking it and I'm not answering it because it's not a good use of my time to track down why you spent $20 at a restaurant. Like that's not where I'm
Right.
adding value to your business. So if you're getting an email from my team on that, that's not a bad thing. And I've also started integrating my team into calls with my clients that are
Mhm.
having monthly calls with me as well because I want them to see what's going on and how we handle the calls and how we set up the calls. But also at the same time, I like to have two sets of eyes on everything. And I'm really big about that
Yeah.
because it helps to catch mistakes and it helps to make sure
Mhm.
that we're not overlooking things because as humans, we move quickly. And I like to make sure that things are booked properly and that everything's accounted for correctly. That's one of the
Yeah.
scary things for business owners is passing things on to their team, but it's the only
Mhm.
way you're able to grow and scale your business. And setting boundaries is so important because I'm learning now that when everyone has the same access to you, then you're not actually getting any work done. I was saying the other day, I feel like my job right now is just answering emails and I don't do any work besides reviewing things at in the middle of the month. And I am always late with that too because I'm just constantly doing emails. So that is one of
Yeah.
my goals for 2026 is to get out of my inbox because I would rather be doing anything else but responding to emails all day. But it's
Mhm.
also because I'm responsible for 30 clients where those people have questions at all times. So it's like someone always has a question. And that's why moving some communication away from me is one of my goals. And it's important and it's hard and it stinks, but it's part of setting those boundaries and redefining my scope of services. I'm going to start giving everyone a pamphlet when they start working with me. And it's this is what your services cover, this is what's included. And if you want these extra things, you're going to have to book a call or it's going to be billed an hourly rate. I have a lot of clients that their service is X, but they're getting X, Y, and Z. It's costing my team time and bandwidth that we could be using to bring on other clients that we can't because we're helping clients and not getting paid for it. So those are some of the
Yeah.
things that I'm working on the boundary side. But I think if I was to do that a year ago, they wouldn't be like I would still be editing it because I feel like as your business grows, you don't know what you don't know and you set these boundaries and you're like, "Oh, this is going to work." But then it doesn't work for everyone. As you take on more clients, you're like, "Oh, wait, this can change," or like this is what I'm able to provide for this price point.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, totally. And I think one of the really important parts that you're speaking about is how, as we continue to move and shift and grow in our business, we are able to differentiate better and better what our time is worth, what the value is that we're providing to our clients, and then how to communicate that. And boundaries are one of the most important parts of that because one, that equals revenue and profit. And then two, it also connects back to the quality of the service, right? if you're able to really service your clients in a way that's like high impact, if you're in your emails all the time answering these questions, you're training them to expect more for
Yeah.
less. And ultimately, our goal is to be in a positive, respectful, reciprocal relationship. So I really like that you are in the process of shifting that. Just to kind of think about, okay, you've got your clients established. How would you navigate setting some of those boundaries with your current
So
clients?
I'm
Have you thought about
Yes,
that?
because I am in the process of drafting emails for price increases for 2026 and also really heavily defining like what's included in that price point. And the reason I have a good idea of what those boundaries should be for future clients is because of the boundaries that current clients are crossing, especially those that
Yeah,
are like, oh, I want very minimal support. And then they're emailing us to pay bills or emailing us to do 7 million other things in their business. This is not our job. I think a lot of it is that I updated my contract and I was like, oh, this is going to be so helpful. But then no one reads the contracts. I've now started putting in bullet points like these are the highlighted things
yeah,
and really have specifically pulled out what's included in the service in my like the beginning of the contract so they know, but no one's
yeah.
going back to that. So that's why, and I hired one of my team members at a point was from an agency and they when I started working with them they gave us a document and it was like here's how to work with us in the best way possible. And I've been wanting to build one of these out for a long time because I was like this is so helpful because it
Yeah,
sets the boundaries right there. And again, I don't know if anyone's going to read it, but it's so much easier to go back and say here's this concrete thing that shows what's included and what's not included. And I think a lot of us don't do that when we
right.
set up a contract or we don't want to sit there and add line items to the contract. Like, I don't want to edit my contract. I had a lawyer write it. I don't want to touch something that's like going to make it like out of scope. But also at the same time, I want to make it very clear these are the services that are included and these are the services that aren't included. That's where adding that in is going to be helpful because right now you get bookkeeping and everyone thinks bookkeeping is different things. And that's where the problem
Right.
lies. And I think a lot of service providers have that problem. Even in marketing, it's like, we're going to do your email marketing, but then email goes into social media and then social media goes into
Right.
LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, and then they're only charging for email marketing, but they're getting all of these other services. And I see it with clients all the time
Right.
because they kind of fold into each other. And that's the hardest part of being like, no. Or you have extra time. So you're like, oh, I can help you with this month. And then it ends up turning into you're doing it every month and you don't have extra time.
Yeah.
But again, you have to have the time tracking support to go back to as well and say, like, this is
Yeah.
how long this is actually taking, or this is the support we've been giving you for the last few months. It takes a lot more time than people think to set those boundaries. That's why a lot of us don't do it because we're busy, we don't have the time, and we're like, it's fine. And it just keeps getting fluffed off month after month. And then you're looking at your bottom line and you're like, why is my business not more profitable? And it's because you're doing a lot of free stuff for people that aren't paying you very well because you've added on all of these things to their service that they shouldn't have been getting.
Yeah, completely hear you on that. And I think that's a part of the maturity of a business. As you continue to grow, you start to learn the structures, the boundaries you should have in place that helps you deliver better value to your clients. When you're able to clearly outline and set those expectations, everyone is much happier at the end of the day. Okay, I'm going to end on two questions. I know as a small business owner, I didn't understand this. When people hear profit, as it relates to like companies, and correct me if I'm wrong, but profit is not the same for a small business owner who is operating as an LLC or solopreneur. The only time that someone would be talking about profit is if they are an S corp, correct? Or
No,
C
so
corp.
you're still talking about profit. I think the problem with small business owners and profit is that there's profit, but then there's actually what you take home after your taxes and your owner's draw, which comes out of that profit number. So revenue is all the sales and all the income that
Yes.
you're bringing in. So if I'm charging for bookkeeping services, all the money that's coming in for clients paying me for bookkeeping services is going to be my revenue. Then you have like cost of goods sold. And some CPAs will argue on this to easily figure out if your services are actually profitable before all of your expenses are factored in. I like to put my bookkeepers and any softwares related to my clients into cost of goods sold. People will argue with me on it. If they want to move it around for tax purposes, I'm fine with that. I like it up there so that I can easily say, I made $5,000 and I spent $2,000 on bookkeeping support. And that percentage is telling me that I have about a 60% margin on my services, which if you're
Yes.
running a business where you have contractors working under you, you want to make sure you have about a 60% margin. And that seems unfair to some people, but in actuality, you need that 60% margin because after you take out your contractor costs, you still have all the other business operating expenses and you have your taxes and paying yourself. So you need that
Correct.
you need that extra money to do all those other things. So then if you
Yeah.
have $3,000 left over from the sales you brought in, about $1,000 of that is going to go to taxes. Let's say you pay
Yes.
yourself $1,000 of that, and then you have about $1,000 in things you're paying for the business a month. That on paper, you'll have a $2,000 profit because the only expenses you're actually writing off as an LLC are the $1,000. The taxes and the owner's draw are coming out after you have your profit number.
Right.
So when you're an LLC, that profit number is kind of like a phantom profit because yes, the IRS is going to look at it and be like, they made $2,000. There is some tax breaks, but I'm not going to get into that because I'm not a tax person.
Right. Yeah.
But then after that, you are now taking what you're making out of the profit and then also taking out money from taxes. So what your actual profit is, it should be after your owner's draw and taxes. And that's not on an income statement. So a lot of people are profitable on paper, but then once they're setting aside money for taxes and paying themselves, they really aren't all that profitable because it goes back to that they're not making enough money off of their services for what they are spending on expenses and then what they
Yes.
are paying out to team members in order to complete those services.
Yes. Okay. So this is actually what I was trying to clarify when I was saying revenue
I knew what you were talking
versus
about.
profit. So, what I was saying is that when we are talking about profit for an LLC or solopreneur, we are talking about money. Like, what is it after you've paid expenses? All of that has come out. And then you have that number that's left over. That's your profit, but you're still taking out your taxes out of that. And so when you look at how much money you're actually making, some people, because of the way that they're pricing their services, they're not making good money in any capacity. But because they're seeing that bigger number, or let's say somebody, let's say they made $4,000, but then after all of that, however you want to break it down, they're only taking home that $2,000, like you mentioned. What I wanted to kind of just highlight this difference, because I think it's important, is the difference between like C Corps and S Corps. When you're talking about profit for C Corps and S Corps, you're actually talking about the money that's left over after they've paid their employees, after they have their expenses, correct? That's how it's different.
Yes. So C Corp's a little bit different because that's more like shareholders and
Mm,
they're like you're kind of an employee at that point, which is a little bit different. But
yes.
with an S corp, you're taxed very similarly. So even if you have like let's say you have $100,000 profit at the end of the year as an S corp, the taxes are still going to come out of that $100,000 number. Where things differ is that you can put yourself on payroll so that you save
Yes.
on the self-employment tax. And then you also,
Correct.
so like instead of out of that 100,000, I take $50,000 and then the rest of it goes to taxes
Mhm.
and some of it gets invested in back into the business. Where it would differ is that then you'd have a profit of 50,000 and then you would be taxed on that 50,000 versus on
Right.
the whole
The full 100.
100,000. And then also because you're paying yourself through payroll, you're contributing payroll taxes, which saves you on the self-employment taxes. And it also helps to bring
Right.
down your tax liability at the end of the year because you're kind of contributing
Right.
on a monthly basis. But you have to be very careful because I know a lot of people will rush to become an S-corp and they won't be able to
And
pay
they're not ready.
themselves properly.
Right.
And you could get audited by the, I don't know how likely it is, especially in this environment, but you could get audited by the IRS and get in trouble for not paying yourself taxable wages. And the reason people don't do that
Totally.
is because they don't have enough money to actually pay themselves what it will cost to pay themselves as an employee with a taxable wage. Or they have a very small salary, and you're not supposed to do that because your salary should be reasonable for the work that you're
Right.
doing for the business. Now,
Yeah.
the reasonability is a little questionable because, like, yes, I'm technically like paying myself as a bookkeeper, but like I'm really the CEO of the company. So, like, but at the same time, like, I couldn't pay myself what you would pay a CEO to run a company. So,
Right.
reasonability, there's a little bit of wiggle room there as long as you have proof of like the services that you're providing. But that's where a lot of people get themselves in trouble is they rush to become an S corp. They aren't setting
Yeah.
aside enough money for taxes, and then they have to also pay themselves at some point throughout the year. And a lot of people will do it
Right.
halfway through the year, but then they have to make up the payments that they didn't pay themselves from January to June, and that gets expensive. And a lot of times you can just do the taxes, but a lot of people don't set enough aside enough money on a monthly basis for the taxes where they get themselves into trouble with.
Totally, totally. I think I just wanted to highlight that there's like a misconception on small businesses and the way that we are looking at our numbers and that important distinction between what one looks like versus another. So S corp versus like an LLC or solopreneur. And I wanted to touch on that a bit because it ties back into, are we charging enough for our services to actually support our lives? And what does that look like? And I agree with you. Too many people will rush into locking in that they're an S corp. And from what I've heard, is that most businesses, most LLCs should not be doing that until they are hitting that six-figure mark on a solid recurrent basis, because that's when you're going to start to be able to see the benefits. Now, I just wanted to highlight that we
Well,
are
and
not
you
giving tax
are
advice.
correct on that part. Like, the
Yes,
100,000 number is usually where it makes the most sense, and it's a lot easier
right.
when you have reoccurring revenue to guarantee you're hitting that than when you're, like, have more sporadic revenue.
Right, exactly, totally. Okay, so let's get into the final question, which I now can't remember what I was gonna ask.
Sorry,
So
I went on a tangent, but I have seen a lot of people miss, and I think online everyone's like, "Oh, you have to become an S corp. Like it's so much better from a tax perspective, but you have to be making enough money that it makes it better because otherwise it's actually costing you more money." And it goes back to not
exactly.
everything online is true. So
That's
always make
also
sure
fair.
you check with a tax preparer and get tax advice from people that specialize in that.
Completely, completely, completely. Just to round out, talking about branding, business structure, how they all play together to create a business that supports you, is profitable, all of those good things. What would you tell someone who is in the process of still navigating? Maybe they feel like their brand no longer fits them and they need to pivot, they need to shift, they need to make some changes. What would your advice be to them as they kind of navigate that process? Because we're all in
Yes.
it. What would you
I
tell
think
someone?
definitely invest in like finding someone that's going to help you really identify what your brand is. I think there's a lot of like AI can do this stuff, but I think AI is missing a lot of the pieces that we need. And as much as we tell it things, I don't think it comes out the same way as like we as humans communicate. Investing
Yeah.
in your brand is important because it's how you show up to the world, and making sure it's
Mhm.
consistent is really helpful because then you're showing up as you across all platforms. Making sure that your brand is actually true to you. A lot of people try to make brands what they think they should be selling, and then they're not actually attracting the ideal clients because their brand isn't really who they're talking to. So I making
Mhm.
sure that if you are investing in your brand, it's actually you because you is going to sell services more than whoever you think you should be. Definitely making that investment is important. I made that investment early on in my business, and I think it was super helpful because I had a
Mhm.
solid brand. If you're in year
Yeah.
one, two, three, even four of your business, you're probably going to change who you want to work with a million times. because you don't know what you don't know. And I think a lot of us are like, oh, this seems like a good group of people to work with. And then you start working with them and you're like, I don't actually like working with them. That's why I
Yeah.
think your brand shouldn't focus on who you're working with. It should focus on you, because if you're targeting who you're working with, your brand is going to be outdated super quickly because you're always changing who you're working with.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. So where can people find you? And real quick, who is your ideal client? Are you taking on new clients? All the good
Yes.
stuff.
So you can find me on Instagram at Bookkeeping Brunette, on LinkedIn as Taylor Bitsoli, and then I am on TikTok, but I haven't really been posting, and that's also Bookkeeping Brunette, and also at my website, bookkeepingbrunette.com. And then my ideal clients are really interior designers or business owners that kind of have a more complex business. So whether it be e-commerce, yoga studios, Pilates studios, kind of people that aren't your general regular service providers. I like to help business
Yeah.
owners that have a more complex business. If you need support in those areas, I am taking on more clients right now.
Yay. I love it. Woohoo. Appreciate you. I will put that information in the show notes so that everybody has access to you if they would like that access. And I appreciate you. Thank you
Thank
for
you for
being here.
having me. This was so much fun.